It's time for another episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show, a podcast where I connect you with thought leaders from across the globe, digging into some of my favorite topics like personal development, marketing, spirituality, and pretty much any other shiny object that happens to catch my attention. Today, my special guest is my friend Terry Brennan, and we're going to be discussing his new book, Persian Betrayal, and that is book number 2 in the Empires of Armageddon series. Terry, it is always a joy to speak with you. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Shaun. It's good to see you again. It's great to be here. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's always fun to talk to you. The place I'd like to have us start today is actually talking about kind of a deja vu moment where you felt like part of your book was almost in the headlines recently. So it is weird when you're a fiction writer and you're like, I thought I was writing fiction. And then there it is up in the headlines. So tell us how all of a sudden your book seemed to come to life.
Well, it's funny that I say it's like I've ripped the story out of tomorrow's headlines. You know, the Ishmael Covenant, which is the title of the first book, is a pact, a peace treaty that's proposed by Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, the Arab Gulf states, to get into a peace treaty with Israel and a mutual defense pact. And they do that because they're more afraid of Iran and Iran's nuclear ambitions than they are of the enmity they've had with the Jewish state in the past. It makes a lot more sense for them to get allied with the Jewish state and present a solid front against the Iranian aggression and against the Iranians and their nuclear intentions. So that was the idea of the Ishmael Covenant. And that was, I think it came out early February, Ishmael Covenant came out. In August 13th, President Trump announced this peace treaty between the United Arab Emirates and Israel, and they called it the Abraham Accord. So, you know, the Abraham Accord, the Ishmael Covenant, it's the same ball game. So far, it's only been the United Arab Emirates that has entered into this peace treaty, but 6 months prior to the Abraham Accord being announced, our book was released, Ishmael Covenant, and it's the same premise. The United Arab Emirates has the 7th largest GDP in the world. It's a very, very wealthy country. It makes $60 billion a year on its oil exports, and they have one of the most diversified economies in the Middle East. They've got a lot of tourism. They're really, Abu Dhabi is a big business hub in the Middle East. So they've got a lot riding on keeping things peaceful, and they're more concerned about the Iranians than they are with any problem they would have with aligning themselves with Israel. So it was a wise political move, a strategic move for them in their relationships. They get a lot of flack from some other Arabs, from the Palestinians, from other Arab countries, but the whole idea of aligning themselves with Israel made a lot of sense. And there's been, for years, there's been a lot of contact between the Arab countries and Israel, under, below the surface, but a lot of political contacts, a lot of cooperation in many ways. I wouldn't be surprised to see other Arab countries join in this Abraham Accord. I think it's certainly a possibility, likelihood in some respects. So 6 months after the book comes out, we have this stuff going on in the real world, where it validates, in a lot of ways, validates what I've presented in Ishmael Covenant as fiction. So fiction becomes reality. Yeah,
when you see stuff like that, you know what you're writing is very timely. So way to be ahead of the curve, Terry. And last time we talked about Ishmael Covenant. Like we said, the new book is called Persian Betrayal. Where does the new book pick up where book number 1 in the series leaves off? Okay.
So it starts right at the same point. That the series is, most of it, the majority of the series takes place over 4 to 5 days. So the action all runs right from one book to the next book. And in the first book, the end of the first book is there's an explosion. The Herva synagogue in Jerusalem is blown up by these terrorists. And the intention is to block a prophecy from being revealed. The second book starts at that same point, where there's this prophecy that was presented that our bad guys think if the prophecy is revealed, it's going to reveal their intentions. They didn't know what to happen. So it starts right there where the Hervis synagogue has been blown up, and while they're trying to decipher this prophecy, the Brian Mullaney is our hero, and the people that are aligned with him. Mullaney finds himself thrust into the middle of this spiritual conflict, spiritual warfare that's being manifest in the physical realm. They are up against Mullaney and the Ambassador Cleveland are up against some really evil, what are created beings, eternal created beings, but they're fallen angels. And that battle is being played out in the physical realm in Israel about these prophecies. There are agents of this evil guy, the Turk, who are constantly attacking Mullaney and the ambassador, trying to get the prophecy and destroy it. So that is continuing. What happens in the second book is that Mullaney is drawn further into this spiritual battle, and he is enlisted by an angel to be the final guardian of the what they call the box of power that had the prophecy in it. So he is pulled into the midst of this battle that's going on, and and that how that plays out through the rest of the story. It really is a good against evil, but Mullaney's being pulled more and more into a personal responsibility for coming against that evil. It makes his position more and more dangerous and risky.
And in terms of that main character, Brian, what are some of the things that he's struggling with internally in terms of responsibility to his family, responsibility to his mission, and even faith? It sounds like he's being stretched beyond any place he's ever been stretched before. Yeah,
he is. He's facing multiple crises. When he was assigned to Israel, he's had a 19-year career as a department of the Diplomatic Security Service. They're the armed agents that protect the Foreign Service people all around the world. He is assigned to Israel and unfairly sort of kicked out of Washington by this devious guy in the State Department. But his family doesn't go with him. They moved 11 times in their marriage, and his wife says, "I've had it. You told us we were going to stay home. We're not going to move anymore." But he gets kicked out to Israel, so his wife and his children stay back in Virginia. So he's facing his marriage is sort of in tatters. His career is in jeopardy, and his father recently passed away, and he never resolved the issues that were going on with his father. And now he finds himself in the middle of not only a physical battle and a physical danger, but also he's being drawn further and further into this spiritual warfare that is new to him. You know, it's something that he's never really been conscious of the depth of it. And so he finds his faith being stretched on so many different levels. He's got two oaths that he sworn, one to his wife in marriage and one to the government, that he would serve in the government. And those two oaths now are competing. So he really finds himself torn, and he's looking for someplace to put his feet. Where do I find some solid ground to stand on? And it really drives him to his knees. It drives him to a place where he gets into arguments with God. You know, why are you doing this? What's going on? How come you can't straighten this stuff out? To where he ends up just, I'll do whatever you want me to do. You know, you tell me what you want me to do, and I'll do it. I don't know how it's going to work out, but I'll do it. So it brings him to that crisis, a crisis in his life, a crisis in his work, a crisis in his faith. Yeah.
Well, a crisis always makes for a good story to follow. So that's fantastic. One of the things that I think is unique about this series, Terry, is you intentionally draw us into a story that has a battle between good and evil. You've got supernatural entities. I think this is the kind of story you could have told without that element. yet this adds a whole different level. I know it gave you a lot of freedom to do a whole lot more with this story. So in terms of that supernatural battle between good and evil, why'd you add that into the story? Why was that important?
That's a good question, Shaun. My wife gave me my Bible when we were first married. It's an NIV study Bible. And in the study Bible, there are all these really extensive notes at the bottom to help you follow. I was reading Ephesians, and in Ephesians 1:3, Paul writes about heavenly realms. And in the NIV text note in the study Bible, it talks about, Paul mentions heavenly realms 5 times in Ephesians. And it says in the note that our connection with Christ and with the risen Christ, that there are ultimate issues that are involved in that. And that there's what they call a titanic conflict going on in heaven between God and the powers that oppose him. And that our struggles here on earth have an impact on that what they call that titanic conflict. The spiritual struggles of the saints here on earth have an impact on that. I never thought about that before. I never thought about how my issues here on earth really could have an impact on this. Never thought about this spiritual battle going up in heaven, that God is being opposed by evil forces in heaven. And so I took that idea of if my wife and I find ourselves challenged by something, we have a problem, we'll pray about it, we'll ask God's direction. Please help us figure this out. How do we do this? But I've never really thought about the challenges that we face really have an impact on what's going on in heaven, and we need to pray how our part of that is played out. So it just opened up a whole different aspect for me about what's going on in the physical realm. What's going on in our lives really has an impact on what's going on in the spiritual realm. And that was sort of the catalyst that got me going with bringing in that evil can be personified, and that that the spiritual evil, what they call eternal created beings, angels, the fallen angels, are going to be as active as guardian angels, and that conflict is very, very real. And I wanted to present that in a way that, this is something that could happen to any of us, where we find ourselves confronting the personification of evil. It's not likely, but it's certainly something but we certainly have that spiritual connection to what's going on as ultimate evil is fighting against ultimate good. And it plays out in the plot, because the guys, the bad guys, the Turk and his disciples, and the Turk is a fallen angel and he's personified. Their intention, what they want to do is they want to thwart a prophecy, a messianic prophecy. If they can thwart the outcome of any messianic prophecy in the Bible, it invalidates all of the messianic prophecies in the Bible, and they can change the end of the book. They could change the outcome of the Battle of Armageddon. And so that's their intention. And so they get involved in this physical realm because they think that the prophecies that will reveal their intentions. And so they got to stop that. So they're really engaged and entangled in what's going on in the physical realm. Did that explain that?
Yeah, that was fantastic. What I like is you're challenging the reader to step into what I would say is maybe more of a biblical worldview. People throughout kind of the timeline of the Bible would have had a lens that they viewed life that was much more supernatural, much more God-oriented. I feel like sometimes in our modern day, that can be a little bit lost. And so I love that you're challenging the reader to step into that and see the story through that particular lens. In terms of characters in the story, you've talked about the Turk, you've talked about Brian, your main character. Are there any new characters that you introduced in this second book, or people that maybe reemerge in the story in unexpected ways?
Yeah. There are 2 new characters that have come out primarily in the second book. One of them is a rabbi, Mordecai Herzog, who was the past head of the rabbinate council in Jerusalem. And he gets involved and brings to the story a lot of understanding of the Jewish scriptures and the Talmud and how those things play into what's going on in the present. And there's a second character that comes into it who is a monk, Stephanos Papadopoulos. They call him Poppy. Thank God they call him Poppy. And he is a computer hacker and a cipher, breaks ciphers. And Mordecai Herzog and Poppy have known each other in the past and engaged each other. And so they draw in Poppy to try to decipher these prophecies that are written in a code. And Papadopoulos brings a bit of the comic relief, and so does Herzog. They're kind of goofy characters, and in some respects, so they can bring a comic edge to it. But they also bring a depth of understanding to what can be going on in the physical realm and how these prophecies can have an impact. One of the things that Papadopoulos talks about is the arrow of time. The arrow of time is that you can't unbreak an egg. You break an egg, it's done. Everything moves in a certain direction. And the prophecies that we're talking about were written 240 years ago by a guy named Neville McGowan. And what he presents is the possibility that the McGowan can still be influencing the events of today because of the prophecies that were written 240 years ago, because he was given insight by the Lord, insight to things that would happen in the future. So it's all that. And these characters bring different thought patterns, different ideas and different perspectives into this conflict that's going on that Brian and some of these others are having. So,
well, and as a guy who lived the first part of his career as a total computer geek and who studied Bible and theology, to introduce a character who's a computer hacker monk, that seems like the ultimate hero to me, Terry.
Papadopoulos brings up that, Unicode?
Uh-huh.
Unicode was somebody decided computers should all speak the same language. I'm making it basic. And they find that the Gowan's prophecies are written in symbols that are very similar to Unicode. And that this guy who lived 240 years ago was a genius and knew mathematics and physics. Had an idea. He understood binary, and so his message was written in this similar symbols to Unicode and in a sense in binary. So that's how he figures it out. So
I love it. That is just fantastic. In terms of the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions that you evoke in the reader, in terms of the reader's journey as they're going through Persian Betrayal, how do you hope you've impacted them along the journey?
Well, personally for me, I hope that people come out of it not only enjoying the ride. It's a great adventure. There's all kinds of stuff going on. It really moves fast. But they come out of it with a better understanding of our responsibility as Christians. And our responsibility is not only to ourselves and our families, to our church, but we have responsibility to live lives that project to the outer world, not only who we are, but also project things that will impact what's going on in this world. And so then will impact the things that are going on in the spiritual realm. Understand that what you do and who you are and how you live is not just personal. It's not all internal. It's things that are going on external. And those external things can reach up to the spiritual realm. It's hard. I'm still wrestling with the whole idea. It's a little foreign, but I think if people begin thinking, our readers start to be thinking of themselves in that light, that what we do here on earth has an impact on the struggles, the battles that are going on in heaven, and that God's intention is for us to have a part in that. Then it changes everything about what I do here, and how I do it and what it means. So if the readers come out with a little bit more of that, and and maybe questions that they want to ask themselves. And how do I find out more about this? And I found that in a lot of the people that have done reviews. They said, gee, I didn't know about this in the past. I didn't know much more about it. I want to go find out more about that. Then that's great. That's a win-win for me.
Yes, you've provoked them to curiosity. I think that's something every author longs for, is that not only will they take in the message you gave them, they'll want to take it further than you even went in the book. That is a great result there. As we talked about, I think this was actually before we started recording the interview, but this series, it's come out very fast. That's one of the things that is a frustration for fiction readers when, if you're talking about a 3-book series, it can be, multiple years that it spans as far as the release goes. And the books in this series have been coming rapid fire. So your next book in the series, it is called Ottoman Dominion. That's going to be releasing in November of 2020, actually. So in just a few months here. Terry, give us a preview. Where do we go next in the series? What our appetite for what we're going to encounter in Ottoman Dominion?
The pace increases in Ottoman Dominion. There's a theory in writing adventure stories, action stories, that proximity increases activity, so that the closer the antagonists get to each other, the closer the hero and the villain get to each other, the more intense things become and the faster they move. So in Ottoman Dominion, Brian Mullaney is getting closer in physical proximity to the Turk as things progress. One of the drivers in the whole idea of the whole series is that there are 3 ancient empires that seem to be on the rise today. One was the Persian Empire, which was Iran and Iraq put together. They were one country. They're both Shia countries. That seems to be on the rise. Iran is so involved with Iraq now. There's the Ottoman Empire, which is essentially Turkey. And the Islamic Empire that came out after the death of Muhammad, that covered from Spain to India. All those 3 empires occupied primarily the same space in the Middle East. And one of the beliefs of the Islamic faith is if they control any part of the world at any one time, they control it forever. So these 3 empires feel that they own the same area. It creates this conflict between the Turks and the Persians and the Saudis, primarily because Iran is pushing for nuclear weapons. So the Ottomans, the Turks and the Saudis, they also want nuclear weapons to be able to offset that power. So one of the things that's going on, there's a plot to raid the U.S. base at Incirlik. There are 60 nuclear weapons based in Incirlik. And so there's a plot to go raid Incirlik and steal these nuclear weapons. So as Ottoman Dominion goes along and the pace increases, one of the things they're trying to do is prevent this attack on Incirlik. And it draws Mullaney and Ambassador Cleveland closer and closer to the Turk and his turf. And it draws them into a climactic battle. There's a big gun battle. And then the final conflict, the good and evil conflict that goes on in that space. And that's about as much as I think I want to give up. I will tell you there's, we have these questions that come out from bloggers and stuff for a book launch. And one of them said, did you know what the end of the series was going to be from the beginning? And I had to be honest. I said, really, to be honest, I didn't know what the end of the series was going to be till about a third of the way, 2/3 of the way through the 3rd book. I was all the way into the 3rd book, and I thought, that's the way to do it, And so I had to go back and tinker a little bit with the 2nd book to make it work. But the way it ends, I love it. I think it's really, really it's a great twist. So let's just leave it at that.
Well, Terry, you've given the listeners, the viewers, enough to at least keep them interested, thinking, I do need to read all the way to the end of book 3. And one last question, in terms of writing a fiction series with characters, to some degree, in terms of not knowing where the series ends, is that because the characters kind of take on a life of their own as they're writing, or as you are writing?
Well, I believe there's only two kinds of writers. I believe there are architects and there are gardeners. Architects build everything from the beginning. They have all the character outlines, and they have the chapter outlines. They have everything laid out before they start to write. Gardeners plant a seed, water it, let the sun shine on it, and see how it grows. It goes a little bit, it goes a little bit. Stephen King wrote a book on writing, and he said all writing is organic. The story tells you what it is. The characters tell you who they are, and I think that's right. That's the way I am. I'm a gardener. I'm a gardener by my hobby, but I'm a gardener in the way I write. I see how it goes. So yeah, the characters developed throughout the series. The story developed throughout the series. I usually start with one idea at the beginning. My idea was that there is these three ancient empires that were going to come into conflict again. And that was it. And you start going from there. So yeah, when I got down there at the end, I think, how am I going to, I thought I knew how it was going to end. And as I got into it, I thought, oh no, this would be better. So yeah, things grow and they develop. The characters grow on their own. I get to know them a little better. There was a character in the first series, Sammy Rizzo. And about halfway through, I found out more about Sammy than I ever believed I knew. So Sammy's telling me who he is. And that's the way that's the way I think life is. And I think that's the way, my writing is. You learn more as you go along and work with it from there.
Yeah, just like spending time with real people. As you spend more time with your characters, you get to know them better. So
exactly.
Well, I appreciate that extra little rabbit trail that we hadn't planned on. That's one thing that always fascinates me about fiction writing is just the life of the characters. They do unexpected things. Story endings suddenly appear as you're along the journey. So one of the very exciting things about that particular style and craft of writing. Terry, in terms of the listeners, the viewers, connecting with you, finding out more about this series, finding out more about your previous series, where can we find you on the web?
You can find me at my website is terrybrennanauthor.com. You can find me on Facebook and on Twitter. I'm really trying to build up my website. I'm going to be starting a blog. I've had a lot more interest through this series of people becoming subscribers to the website. I've got special content for subscribers on the website. So terrybrennanauthor.com is really where I'm most active.
And like we do with every episode, we'll have detailed links in the show notes, places where you can connect with Terry and pick up your very own copy of this book and the earlier book and the forthcoming book in this series. You need all three. You have to have the whole set and complete the whole story. It's time to bring this episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show to a close. Many thanks for being a part of my conversation with Terry Brennan. Once again, our book today was Persian Betrayal. That's book number 2 in the Empires of Armageddon series. Again, if you'd like to find out more about Terry, a great place to start is his website. You can find that over at terrybrennanauthor.com. And Terry, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing with us today. It's always a joy. It's always an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you, Shaun. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.